I loved being an electrician. The joy we do get is in the craft that we learn and being able to do that job and see the results of that job every day. That's gratifying, and that's usually what keeps us coming back to work, because we love the work. A job in the trades is something that almost every woman that I've met who works in the trades loves her job. Some of the guys that I've met in the trades, they are here because their parents made them or because they didn't know what else to do. For the women, it's a choice, and they love the work. Getting into the trades, I was surprised at the amount of discrimination there was against women. And then when I moved into the trades, I was surprised that the culture of the trades seemed to be behind the rest of the world by a couple of decades. Pretty much the construction industry is like the last frontier of locker room mentality, where bullying and harassment is normalized, it's accepted.
When you see statistics like more than 50% of women will be physically or sexually assaulted during their lifetime.
A stat like that is really alarming in that it touches everyone. Doesn't matter who you are, you know somebody that's part of these stats.
4% of construction workers are women, and that's stayed like that for decades. So obviously we have a problem, and despite all of the work that's been done to recruit, despite all of the work that's been done, government looking at it, government policy, we remain at 4%. Obviously there's a problem on the job sites.
The issues about gender-based violence, including what happens in the workplace to women and others, has thrived on the silence of most of us in society.
So we need to change that. It's the reason why women aren't staying in the trades, and others are turned away from it as well. It's a toxic environment. The reason we reached out to Ending Violence Association BC and the BC Lions is they have a program, Be More Than a Bystander, and their training method of men talking to men and conveying the message to each other has been proven to be successful.
I think there's just such a lack of knowledge on what men can do to be more than a bystander.
It's an incredible, dynamic group of men that are going to be stepping up and speaking up and encouraging their brothers and their sisters to do the same.
When we went through the first day, it was really powerful. I went through all sorts of different emotions, I would say.
I was really curious what the program, I had some idea what the outline would be, but I really didn't know the makeup of the group and how they would react to the program and how deep it would get.
Growing up when I was a kid, there were certain things that I knew right from wrong, but I wish I had tools on things that I actually could do. And I feel that's why it's so important to have a program like this.
The women in society and our sisters have, for a long time, kind of carried the sword and carried the load here.
But I don't think it's possible for women to reach men in the same way that I see men reaching other men.
The men in the position, the leadership positions, can be role models for the young men coming in.
It is our responsibility to ensure that these workers get a safe, encouraging opportunity in our craft to help facilitate bringing more women into our trades.
There's not a company out there that doesn't recognize the value of having good people in the workforce. And right now, 4% of trades workers are women. So we'd love to see that number increase. And this course can help you do that.
Most, if not all men, have the ability to make a difference on that site. They need the tools to do it, and that's the importance of what we just did.
You know, the time is now. There's no time better than now. You look at how society has shifted with the Me Too movement. It's never been a better time to get involved and to help and be supported.
Welcome back, everyone.
If you're just joining us, please note that you can access the closed captioning on your desktop. Click on the CC or live transcript button on the Zoom menu to the right of the chat button. In the mobile app, click the More button on the control menu. The font size can be adjusted by going to Settings on your Zoom app and choosing Accessibility at the bottom. Our next session explores BCCWIT's partnership with Ending Violence Association and the Be More Than a Bystander program. This program has been adapted for the trades, is a key strategy for addressing gender-based bullying, harassment, and violence in the industry. I love how it targets male leaders in the trades and what amazing allies those male leaders have become to help shift the toxic culture of the trades. Again, we're hoping to leave time for the panel to answer a few questions at the end. So please put your questions in the Q&A in Huva. And don't forget, you get extra points for engagement to win awesome prizes. I am really pleased to introduce to you Tracy Porteous, Executive Director of the Ending Violence Association, to lead this discussion. Tracy and I first talked about modifying this program for construction. I think it was at least a decade ago. She does fabulous work in this area. She's an anti-violence trailblazer, a longtime ally of trades women in BC, and one of the original partners of BCCWIT. Over to you, Tracy.
Thanks so much, Lisa. And I would like to say happy International Women's Day to everybody online and everybody that's also out there on the tools, building our homes and our offices and our places to live and play. In 2010, after successive decades of only seeing increases in the amount of sexual and domestic violence being perpetrated against women, including homicides of women and girls in our province, I had an idea about the possibility of getting men involved in the movement to end gender-based violence. And partly I had that idea because I was inspired by the work of a guy by the name of Jackson Katz, and he is an American and a gender-based violence prevention educator. And he was a pioneer. I like to call him the grandfather, but he hates that. But the grandfather of the bystander intervention movement. And he got me thinking about how potentially awesome it would be to reach out to and begin working with men who were larger than life and who portray essentially the top of the food chain. If we could get alpha males, football players, and I call these guys the gladiators of our time, how potentially game-changing it would be to have these men speak up to and inspire other men about breaking the silence on gender-based harassment and bullying and violence. So I decided to kind of put all my courage into one bag and got a meeting with the BC Lions, and I pitched the idea. And to my great surprise, they said yes. I was quite shocked. But I guess I shouldn't have been so shocked because they could see immediately that they have a platform that myself and other feminists across the country don't have when it comes to talking to men. They also loved our analysis and our bystander program premise, which is the fact that the vast majority of men don't commit violence. That it's a minority of men who do this committing of violence over and over on a repetitive basis. The vast majority of people, however, without any training, without any instruction, without any practice, don't know what to say or what to do in the face of disrespect and abuse. So most people don't want to make it their business. They just walk on by. And so the Lions got really excited about our vision, which was and still is today that imagine the difference that could be made if the vast majority of good men who don't commit abuse and harassment began to speak up to the minority who do. And in my mind, that is social change, and that's what we have been doing for the last decade. In the next year, the program launched, the Be More Than a Bystander, Break the Silence on Violence Against Women launched. And since that time, we've trained over 220,000 people in person, most of them high school students in schools across the province. And that's thanks to funding from government, from labor, and from the corporate sector. And from then, almost immediately, other people in other sectors saw the potential value of a program such as this. And so the program was picked up by the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, the Hamilton Tiger Cats, Saskatchewan Amateur Football, who has 25,000 members, BCIT, SFU, the United Steelworkers, the BC Marine Employers Association, the International Longshore Warehouse Union, BC Hydro, and the list keeps going. And so as Lisa was saying, a few years into the launching of the Bystander program, we started having conversations with women from the BCC, from the BC Centre for Women in the Trades. And they laid out to us their vision of bringing the Bystander program into construction trades across BC. And what I got from them is that they wanted to do this because just like community settings, women in construction sites were the brunt of jokes and behaviors. And these jokes and behaviors were something short of respectful. And they also wanted to do something about the low numbers of women that were able to stay in the trades. And essentially, they said they wanted to create a sea change in this workforce. So we agreed to work in partnership with them and have been training cohorts of men in construction for them and with them and beside them. And just like the BC Lions football players that stepped up to be part of this program, men in the construction trades are also larger than life men and have been stepping up and changing minds and hearts and behaviors in your sector as well. They are now 100 men strong and still building. And we have the great opportunity this afternoon to hear from some of the men that have taken the Bystander program in construction. And one of the original Bystander spokesmen, who is one of our longest standing trainers for training other men to speak up, and that is J.R. Larose. J.R. hails from the One Arrow First Nations. He's a 9-year veteran of the CFL, and in 2011, he won a Grey Cup championship with the team. I like to think that had something to do with the fact that that's the same year we started the Bystander program. JR is passionate about being an ally for women and is one of our trainers in the BCC WIT's EVA partnership Train the Trainer program. So please help me welcome J.R. Larose. Next, we have, thanks JR, sorry. We have Laird Cronk, and as all of you know, Laird is the president of the BC Federation of Labor. Laird is a Red Seal electrician by trade, a board member of the Industry Training Authority, and a proud graduate of the partnership Bystander program between EVA and BCC WIT. And he, in fact, was among the first cohort that learned to speak up and be more than a bystander in the construction trades. Next is Rod Bianchini, who is the Chief Operating Officer of the Industry Training Authority, BC's apprenticeship for the training system. That is the apprenticeship system for training trades. And Rod is a certified roofer by trade and a proud graduate of the Bystander program between BCC WIT and EVA. And he was among the third cohort in January 2020. And last, but certainly not least, is Chris Atchison, who is the president of the BC Construction Association. And that happens to be the largest and most diverse construction association in the province, serving more than 10,000 employers throughout a network of 4 regional construction associations. Chris is also a proud graduate of the Bystander program, and he was within the 6th cohort that happened in October of 2020. So welcome, Chris. Welcome, men. Thank you for stepping up. I can't tell you, as somebody who's been working in the field of responding to gender-based violence for almost 40 years, what a breath of fresh air it is to stand beside our brothers and to see you teaching other men that there's thousands of ways that they can speak up and be more than a bystander. So I have the pleasure today to be your moderator, and I've got a bunch of questions to share with these great men. And so first up, I want to send the focus over to J.R. Larose. J.R., when this program first came across your plate as a BC Lion, can you help us understand your thinking about how you decided to come and become involved?
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you, Tracy, Porteous. And again, I just want to echo quickly, Happy International Women's Day. When this was brought to us, to the BC Lions in the off season of 2010, it was a no-brainer for me to want to get involved. I think many of us know people that have been affected by violence, abuse, or bullying in the workplace. And for me, it's something that I'd witnessed. There was a personal connection, you know, seeing my mom being abused by the men in her life, my sister as well, and living with the shame and not knowing really what to do. And when this program was introduced to us, it was a no-brainer for me I wanted to now become part of the solution. And by remaining silent, we condone these acts of violence and abuse to continue to take place. And so I wanted to use my voice and my platform. And that's why I got involved in this program. And it's changed my life. It's changed me as a man, as a father and husband. And I'm forever grateful for your leadership, Tracy, in bringing this to the BC Lions, because it's been life-changing.
Well, I'm mutually grateful as well, JR. It's one thing to have an idea. It's another thing to see men take the idea and run with it and resonate with people the way you do. So speaking about the question around how this has changed you as a man, I wanted to ask Laird if he had any thoughts about that, or if getting involved in this program changed your how you operate in the world at all, Laird.
Well, thanks, Tracy, and great to be here. I'd also like to recognize it is International Women's Day, and I'd also like to recognize I'm speaking to you today from the unceded territory of the Esquimalt and the Songhees First Nations on a beautiful sunny day. So, such an important topic. How does it affect or change you? It's incredible. When I came into this sort of first cohort of the group and the training, and JR was there and others to really provide us the tools and open our eyes to what we could do to address these things, what I found out was 30 or 40 other men in that room shared the thoughts I had. I wasn't the only one that had those thoughts. I wasn't the only one that knew that this was wrong. I wasn't the only one that struggled with what are the tools to take the action. And, we went through 3 or 4 pretty intense days. We broke down some of the stereotypes. We had tremendous folks to help us get through it. I think it changed all of our lives. I really do. I think it makes you reflect on your home life. It makes you reflect on relationships. And what it does is it provides you the skills, like all the trades people that are watching today, it provides you the skills to do the job. If you don't know what to do and situations arise and you're in the trade, you can't get that work done. So many of us knew we were in situations where something needed to be done, but we didn't have the tools. And often you stay silent because you don't know what to do. I'm sort of a personality type. I would either sort of really get intense and probably start something that was pretty difficult, or I would do nothing. And usually it was to opt to do nothing because you don't want to go to that sort of DEFCON 3. So this showed us there were other ways to do it that were actually effective. So powerful.
Laird, that's so powerful what you've just said. And it reminds me of kind of like a motto that I think we've all adopted because we experience it, is that once you become conscious of this stuff, you can never become unconscious. And so in many ways, it's an enlightening opportunity for anybody who takes this training to see the world from perhaps a different lens. And it provides you with an opportunity that now perhaps you can do something about stuff that happens in front of you that you didn't used to not know what to do about.
It really makes a difference. And, not to sort of talk about all the things that were talked about over those 3 days, but you realize when you open up and talk about these issues and you find out other men feel the same way, it is empowering. You get the tools and you're empowered to know that you're not alone in dealing with this, and you step forward and you can't unsee it. As you said, Tracy, once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. It's time to not be in the shadows on it anymore. You have to do something, and having the tools is important. When you learn from other men in those 2 or 3 days, when you start to tell stories about the women in your life, and there's very consistent stories that we start sharing about all the things they do to mitigate the violence and the harassment they've lived through, whether they wear runners when they go out at night with other women, when we could still go out before COVID, whether they carried keys between their fingers when they were walking to their car at night, all of the things that became consistent stories, we all sort of knew it was there, but we never really said it to each other out loud. We never really recognized it. We didn't know what to do about it. Super powerful.
Thanks, Laird. I know that you're really quite passionate about this program and about the change that it has the potential to make in your industry. And I wanted to ask Rod your thoughts, about that, and also about something that's been talked about, which is essentially that moment where all of us, I think, have been, where we feel like we're a deer in headlights. And whether that is something that happens on the street or at a party or at a bar or on a work site, where you see something that we're so shocked by, we don't know what to do. And how do you think this program has the potential to help people in construction in this way?
Thank you, Tracy. And I'd like to acknowledge International Women's Day as well. And I'm coming to you from the Tawasin Nation lands as well. Yeah, I echo the comments of GR and Laird 100%. And for me, I had many deer light in the headlights moments in terms of being part of either rhetoric or actions that I've observed, and I stood back, not having the tools, and took a very similar path that Laird explained, choosing either to walk away or potentially escalate it into something that unfortunately then becomes something different than what the issue is. So the program for me has been a tremendous personal journey. It's enabled me to have tools to talk about what's happening, and also tools to be able to intervene. And something as simple as not acknowledging and standing beside a person while they're going through something is so powerful. And I didn't understand that until I took the program. Something as powerful as taking someone aside after and saying, hey, you know that comment you made, did you have a chance of understanding what the impact was to that particular person? And you'd get constant responses like, oh, it was just a joke, I was only joking. But really being able to articulate that and having that toolbox, so to speak, to be able to go at it. And not only that, to be able to pass that toolbox on to other people that are around you and be able to help them and understand where they're coming from.
That's so powerful. And I know that this is kind of a repetitive word, but I think it's so apropos because, in the face of feeling helpless, which is most of society, on an issue that 70% of Canadians report to Stats Canada that they know a woman who has been sexually or physically harmed. So how powerful it is to actually arm everybody to actually have what you say as the tools to actually do something about it. And the finesse of this program, and what I also love about it, is that there's a zillion ways to be more than a bystander. It's not always about confrontation. There's a lot of really cool ways about being more than a bystander. But before we get into more examples about that, I wanted to ask Chris your thoughts about one of the things that I think that a lot of people asked in the initial stages, because the bystander program that we were doing with the Lions was really about gender-based violence. And so people were like, well, what does this have to do with our workplace? What does this have to do with construction trades? Because that's stuff that happens outside. And so I think that one of the things that we've learned is that there's a continuum of disrespect and demeaning jokes and things that happen to people at work and at home, and they're kind of on the continuum. And I'm wondering, Chris, if you could help us understand from your perspective the importance of this kind of education for workplace culture change.
Thanks, Tracy, and happy International Women's Day, everybody. The importance of a program like Be More Than a Bystander to the construction industry is immeasurable. Ever since there's been construction, there have been systemic barriers in place to prevent the acceptance and acceleration of more women to be successful on those sites. And the barriers that we have in society, which are weighted towards a men's society. And I think one of the greatest learnings of this program, and it coincided with everything that we're learning about with entitlement and privilege. And so for us to be immersed for these number of days in this Be More Than a Bystander training just reinforced the fact that those that are taking the training are coming from what is right now a position of power. And that with that power comes a responsibility at this point in time to be able to impact and assist with the change that is going to be required to make a better society and also to make a better workplace culture. The importance to construction is that we've got a system that is broken, and we need to fix the system, not the women who are trying to come into the system. We need to fix our culture to make it more acceptable to everybody. And that includes the wonderful tradeswomen who are demonstrating capacity. And I'll say that for years we've done a disservice to underrepresented groups in construction by saying, hey, it's a great job. It might be a dirty job at times, but we pay well. We've got good benefits. Come on in, give it a try. And the recruitment side of things is way ahead of the retention side of things, because now we've made these promises to people to come into our industry, but the industry isn't mature enough. It hasn't evolved enough to retain the skilled workers that we want to have in the industry. And so a program like this is starting to equip the work sites themselves, the workforces themselves, with the tools to be better co-workers, to be better employers, to better retain the skilled workers that we're going to need to continue to build the province in the future. So a program like Be More Than a Bystander is about creating an awareness for all of us in society and how we view our wives and daughters and co-workers who we value so much, and then taking that lens and applying it the same that same lens to worksite excellence and making our work sites acceptable, welcoming, and removing all anything that would promote hazing, bullying, and harassment, just to make it intolerable, unacceptable, and remove that type of behavior for good.
That's awesome, Chris. Thank you. And Lisa mentioned when she was doing the introductions that one of the conversations, Lisa, that we had is that you identified the bystander concept as potentially powerful. And you also identified that you wanted it to be adapted to construction trades, because we weren't just going to be talking about things that happen in the community or things that happen at home, but things that happen on the work site. And I wonder if anybody wants to just jump in and speak about it, and maybe I'll throw it back to Laird, the kinds of behaviors that you see this program able to interrupt in construction sites.
Right. Thanks, Tracy. And this one was specific to construction, but maybe I'll give you an example as the Federation president with these soft hands away from construction for a while now, of where it can be really powerful in all worlds. Construction being critical, but these skills are adaptable all over the place. I mean, one of the key takeaways from my time in the training is that it's men predominantly that are causing the harm. And while it's a small amount of men that do it, the rest of us need to step up and do something. It's our responsibility. These issues are not on women to fix. These are on men to say to men, this is wrong. We need to step in here. And such a powerful lesson to learn. You can't unknow it, as we said. So my example would be shortly after the training that I went through. About a week later, I was at a conference, sort of high-end leader conference. And I was around at the end of the day having a glass of wine, and some had beer in a room in the conference center. And one of the men in the group of half a dozen or so of us, we're all telling stories about the conference, etc., started to tell a really demeaning joke about women. And I know probably everybody in this call can appreciate those moments happen way too often. So there I am, a new graduate. And I just happen to be wearing, by the way, my BCC with More Than a Bystander shirt. And I won't turn around here, but on the back in huge letters, it says, I'm More Than a Bystander, are you? So anyway, as this joke begins, and I carry a pretty big badge, if I can put it that way, Fed president, but taking on your colleagues in the peer pressure, like I challenge anybody not to say that isn't something that can give you pause at times. And this was a significant colleague, sort of power player in the industry that was telling the joke. Well, I couldn't unsee this. I could not act for the first time. I had to really do something and put my money where my mouth was, So what I did is I recognized in a flash I was wearing this t-shirt, and I turned around in the group, and I noticeably put my back to the group, and there it said on the back of it in huge letters, I'm More Than a Bystander, are you? And the reaction was laughter, nervous laughter, instant laughter. The person that was making the joke went, yeah, we know you're part of that, all that good stuff, but they stopped. Now, a couple of minutes later, I turned back around, other stories started. He came back again and started with another one. And I turned around and I simply said, I can do this all night. And there was less laughter. And he
said something like, okay, I get it. And we moved on. He never said it again. Now, that didn't change the world. But what it showed me was I had a way to not sort of go to war politically, if you will, with this leader, but make a simple statement that gave others in that group that I believe didn't like that either, the ability to find a way outside of that world, to stop that, to put a, break that chain. And for me, that was like such a powerful experience, because there it is in action, and you can't not do something once you know what to do.
Among so many really important, really important things you just said, Laird, is one of the concepts that the Bystander program is about, which is making these behaviors not socially acceptable. 30 years ago, Mothers Against Drinking and Driving started a campaign to get people to stop drinking and driving because they wanted people not to die. At the same time, we had another big social campaign at the same time, which is around wearing seatbelts. And we wanted people to wear seatbelts because we didn't want them to get hurt or die. We also have been doing similar work around getting people to stop smoking. And so the Bystander program, I think, is taking its place, maybe 30 years behind some of these other big social change movements. But nonetheless, we are taking our place to really try to make change because we care about people's well-being. One of the things that I love about the Bystander program is that it's not set up to demonize the person who says the wrong thing or behaves in a way that isn't acceptable, because we're all products of a society where we're socialized in certain ways, and there's certain norms and certain work cultures that people have been getting away with for years. So we don't mean to say that, being disrespectful or worse is okay. But the program is about calling people out, interrupting the behavior, making it not socially acceptable. I want to call on Rod and ask Rod to share from your perspective an example. What Laird shared, I think, was really helpful for people to understand. There's thousands of ways you can be more than a bystander. Do you have a story that you would want to share with us?
I do, Tracy. Thank you. And very similar to Laird, I mean, the Industry Training Authority occupies a very interesting space within the trade system. We manage the apprenticeship system and the trades qualification system for the province. So we're in constant interaction and collaboration with either industry groups, associations, or even down to individual apprentices and sponsors. So it's quite varied in terms of our exposure and our input. And I was part of a fairly high-level industry meeting, and there was an individual that was consistently making some really interesting snide remarks and jokes, very much focused on women and whether women should be in the trades. And so I had that deer in the headlights moment, but not because I didn't know what to do. It was what was ping-ponging in my head was how am I going to deal with this? I can't let it go. And I think I can honestly say I was armed with that tool from the program, to be frank. If it was 2 weeks before the program, I probably would have let it go. I probably would have been satisfied with the responses of, well, they're trades workers. That's just what they do and say. And it was just not acceptable anymore to me, because to everyone's point, you can't unsee it anymore. So my choice at that time was to take the person aside after the meeting and just point out that those comments weren't helpful and they were in fact potentially damaging. Didn't get much of a reaction. At that point, I don't know if I really cared if I got a reaction. I was very satisfied that it was pointed out and it was brought to their attention. So that was my way of doing it. But I do want to talk a little bit about my own struggle, even at that time, with the tools to kind of figure out, okay, what do I do here? And it's not as it's a muscle that needs to be exercised. And to Laird's point, the more we talk about it, the more we actually get together as men and talk about our personal experiences and our corporate experiences, is where we develop that kind of baseline of, no, this is not acceptable. So that was my experience.
Well, I can't tell you how excited I am, and we have time, right? We don't have to do this overnight. This might be social change, one conversation at a time, or one group of men at a time, or at conferences where you have the opportunity to speak to more people as you're doing today. I want to throw it back to JR, and because I think one of the things that you just reminded me, Rod, when you were speaking, is the kind of peer pressure and how it can be so difficult to speak up. But if you have another guy on your work site that has also the training, and another guy on your work site that has also the training, and JR tells an amazing story of what happened in the BC Lions locker room. JR, if I could ask you to share with us how that changed in a kind of a 1 year period.
Yeah, no, it definitely did. And, you know, as we look at, you know, how it can be challenging at times to speak up, especially amongst your peer group. I mean, in the locker room, you got 60 players, A-type personality guys, you know, that I think our workplace was built on chemistry where, you know, it was cool to just kind of go along and not speak up on things that have been seen as okay, I guess, that obviously weren't. And I'll never forget our quarterback, Travis Lulay, at the time. You know, when after games, guys would talk about what they had done on the weekend or the locker room talk, the objectifying remarks. And I'll never forget Travis Lulay. You know, there's a group of guys that were saying, you know, some inappropriate things. And he's like, hey, be more than a bystander. You know, at the time it sounded so, you know, it sounded cheesy in a sense, but it made such an impact. Being able to watch our leader, you know, our quarterback say something to a group of guys, but the response was truly amazing, because then now other guys start to chime in. Now we feel comfortable. We talk about, you know, you don't just start benching 500 pounds the first day you do it. You know, it takes time. You start with 10, 20, whatever it is, then you finally get up to it. But the more we now start practicing ways to be more than a bystander, made a huge impact. I was fortunate to play 5 years with the Lions, and I can say from day one when I was started in 2010 to when I retired in 2015, it's been a huge change in the culture, what's acceptable, what's tolerated. I'm not saying it's perfect by any means, but I think we started off with 8 to 10 guys in the training. Well, guess what? Each year we had another 8 to 10 guys being trained. You know, we talk about a team being full of 60 guys, but now over half the team has gone through this training, you know, and we talk about that leadership and that courage to speak up. And the strength in numbers. And that's what this program has really shown us as athletes. But, you know, if it could work in the Lions locker room, it can work anywhere. And that's what I love about it.
It's so inspiring. And JR, I don't know if people know this, is part of another program, another bystander training program that we've been running since 2015 with the entire CFL. So JR and Angus Reid have been partnering with our anti-violence counterparts in the cities across the country that have a CFL team, and training every player and every coach and every staff person of every team. And I can say that in my consultation role with the CFL, the number of players and people within the CFL that are being investigated for gender-based violence has dropped dramatically. And I think now, you know, a little bit of training isn't going to change people that have a lifetime of problematic behavior, but a little bit of training can create peer pressure to not allow that in our midst. And those people can go off somewhere else, which is, I mean, obviously we don't just want to move them on, we want to change behavior. But I think it's a start what we're doing. You know, one of the things I wanted to come to Chris about is the concept of, this happened early on in one of our initiatives. We were training men in resource extraction. And the initial reaction we got from some of those men is like, well, why us? Why are you picking on us? Is it something, you know, like we're not committing any more violence against women than any other industry? And we said it was really our mistake. We should have come proactively out with this, but we said, no. It's not because men are, you know, essentially hugely problematic, but if we can engage men in construction work sites and resource extraction work sites and all of the other trades work sites, I mean, these are work sites with thousands and thousands of men. And so back to the adage, imagine the difference that could be made if the vast majority of good men began to speak up. And so, Chris, I'm wondering what your thoughts are about how we further develop this program and the concept of not allowing bad behavior to go unspoken to in construction. What are your thoughts about what we need to do going forward?
Well, I absolutely think we are on the right track now. I think the timing is, for a number of reasons, the timing is very good. for, and it might sound like a broken record because maybe we've been on the cusp of saying that before, but I think programs like the Be More Than a Bystander program are at an important time in our lifetimes, where they are having it is the right message being delivered at the right time to the right groups of people. More and more, we are finding that the employers in the construction industry are welcoming these types of discussions. They want to be better themselves. They want to be the leaders, and they just don't have the tools to do it. So it's breaking down some of those barriers, that this isn't difficult. This is good not only for your work site, for your business, but it fits within the mandate that construction has about leading with safety. Safety is everything for our industry, and it hasn't always been that way. 50 years ago, 30 years ago, there were more documented incidents of safety violations and safety issues, and it's always at the forefront of what we do. So we've convinced our entire sector over years of hard work between labor and employers to make sure that's our priority. And the Be More Than a Bystander program fits absolutely perfectly into that mandate of safety, and the culture of safety needs to be upheld. So again, it's about fixing the system to allow for the types of behaviors that we can tolerate, and eradicating those that we absolutely have to remove, both from our society and from our industry. Construction can be a leader. As you can tell from those voices around the table right now, construction is willing to still be a leader and wants to be a leader at the forefront of everything as it pertains to workforce development. And that means bringing the people in, making sure that the people are able to be safe on work sites and thrive in those roles. One of the surprising stats that still sticks with me to this day, it's that about 90% of women have experienced or had to make steps to avoid sexual harassment in the workplace. And on International Women's Day, when we're talking to people who are wanting to be involved in the construction industry or gainfully employed in the construction industry, I will say this isn't about construction. This is about our society, and we better step up as leaders in our industry in order to bring that number, to remove that number altogether, because it's an abhorrent stat, and one that we can all do better. And I think from the leaders on this call, it's an obligation that we made. It's a commitment that we made to our facilitators of our respective sessions, that we are in a position to help bring about this change, and we would welcome other industries to be part of it as well.
Wow. I'm not a woman in the trades, but I am a woman. And I've spoken to a lot of women that are on the tools, and some of them like Lisa that now have soft hands. And I can tell you that this is deeply powerful stuff for all of us. The leadership that you four men are showing, and the other 100 guys that we've trained and the more to come, means more to us than anything. And we talk about in the training about how much this is a leadership issue. And leadership, whether you're the head of the BC Federation of Labor or the head of the Construction Trades Employers Association, or a shop steward on a job, or the safety officer, out in a rural setting where work is being done. And Laird, wonder if you could talk a little bit about the role of this program and its connection with you and other men in terms of leadership.
Well, great question, big question. And the reality is this: I'm fortunate enough that I found my way into this cohort, and the magic of the training and the tools and the understanding, and recognizing other men feel the same way, and then getting those tools and all of those pieces. I want to be really clear, though. Okay, I'm the Federation president, but so what? Like, there are men in this cohort that I was in who may not have sort of big fancy titles. They were construction workers on job sites. They were forepersons on job sites. They were small company owners, whatever they were. We all have a role to play as men. So The neat thing, though, is when you leave that cohort and you have those tools, you not only take personal steps that we've talked about, but if you do have some way in your own leadership, whatever that leadership is, maybe it's leadership within your family, leadership within your church, leadership within your community, that you do what it is that you can do. So, I mean, I've got some pretty good things that I can do because I have a lot of support in the job that I do and a lot of resources, and I intend to do all of those things. But it's really important. It doesn't matter what your amount of resources, it doesn't matter what your title is. You do what you can do. And that's what we're asking men to step up and do. And Tracy, if I could say one more thing, I think it's really, really important, at least through my eyes, really important to recognize that, you know, the men that went through the cohort I was in, we're not all perfect. I'm going to tell you that I've done things in my life that were not appropriate in certain moments, may have told jokes, others have. Maybe it was to fit in. Maybe that's how you tried to be cool. Maybe that's how you tried to keep your job, whatever it was. I want to make this point. If you don't think it's right and you want to step up and do something, you don't have to have been perfect in your life to step into that role. Don't tell yourself as men, you know what, I told an inappropriate joke about women on a job site. Who am I to do this? That's not true. You have the moment you can seize now to say, I get it. I don't feel right about it. And I want to do something about it today. And I think that's a really important thing for men to understand. You don't have to have been a perfect role model your whole life to be able to step up now. It's not contradictory to step up now and say, this isn't right, and I want the tools, and I want to do something about it.
Really important. I'm so glad that we're going down that road, Laird, because who among us can say that we're perfect? And as I said, like, we're a product of the socialization of our times. And I've had the pleasure and the honor of being with so many men that have taken this bystander training who suddenly had light bulbs go off about things that they never thought about. It never occurred to them. And why is that? Not because they're an evil person, because they're socialized as men, not as women. They walk through the world with a level of privilege and a certain set of eyes that is different than women and trans and racialized people and queer people and non-binary people and so forth. And so, you know, this course is really, you know, opening up everyone's eyes to the lens of other people, which is, you know, really important. I would ask, maybe I'll go to Rod. What do you think that you would want to say to other men in your industry that haven't taken the course yet, that might be teetering on the edge? Obviously, not everybody has to take it. This isn't a mandatory thing, it's a voluntary thing. But what would you say to other, you know, some of your colleagues that, you know, whatever you say might make the difference of them opening up and getting involved?
I would start off by saying, be curious. Be curious and give it a chance. Because I was one of the people that had the opportunity to take the course, not because I had a light bulb moment and, you know, I woke up one day and said, I'm going to change the world. I was given the opportunity. And it was within that first session that was actually run by Laird and Scott Comfort, if I remember correctly. And it was the 90-minute, but it was the moment, and this is what I would say to them. It's that moment of clarity that comes to you when you realize exactly what you said, Tracy, about, you know, it's not about being bad or good. It's about understanding the impact of those actions, and not really judging them after the fact 20 years prior. You know, I was a trades worker in 85. I got my ticket as a roofer. And to Laird's point, there was moments I still clearly remember now, which I wish I could go back in time, and I can't. But yeah, so the very specific things is be curious and give it a chance, because the benefits are a millionfold, not only personally, but organizationally. And if I could touch upon the leadership piece, because I think that's really important. You know, people often look at leadership as this big thing, but it actually is both at a very personal level, but even organizationally. You know, because of our experience at ITA, we're able to train almost all the employees with a 90-minute session. We're able to train 25 ITA male staff for the 3-day session. And we've actually corporately decided to create a space for those men to talk about this, on our time. And I think, and that's not me or the IT, that's the collective coming together saying we need this space and us accommodating that. So I just wanted to touch upon that.
Thank you, Rod. And further to your point and to Laird's point, again, it's like, it's not that people, have to have a blank slate before they step up. But now that you know what you know about what's happening in the world, every day we turn on the news and we see stuff about the ongoing issues related to murdered and missing Indigenous women, and the Me Too movements that are going on in almost every work culture across the world. The domestic violence deaths that we see, knowing the fact that we have such a low number of women in the trades and an even lower retention number. So now that we know that, what are we going to do about it? That's what this is about, right? It's not about having, not a life ahead, behind us, but it's what are we going to do with our life ahead? And all of you men have stepped up in such profound ways and continue to do that. And again, without sounding like a broken record, I can't, on behalf of women and survivors and all of the people that care about social justice, I can't thank you enough. Now, we've got some questions that are coming in on the chat, and I want to thank Lindsay for helping with formulating the questions coming in from people and then bumping them over to me. So if you don't mind, I'm going to jump in and ask the first question of Chris. And here it is. I would love to see more education about language and about how demeaning language can change so that no one feels put down at work. Too often words that are gendered female are used as insults, and we learn that in the training, don't we? But those that are gendered male, those words and descriptions are usually meant as compliments. So we use feminine type words and language to put people down, including men, and we use male language and pronouns and stuff to appreciate, things like leadership. And I wonder if you could say, like, how do we make that shift? Because it's not just about behaviors and actions and outward abuse, but it all starts with language, right?
Yeah, I think it was one of the great learnings and light bulb moments of taking the Be More Than a Bystander training, when we did a lot of whiteboard work and just documenting all of these the awful words that are being used and on work sites to put people down in general. And they were predominantly gendered female in the use of those words. And so that created a real visceral awareness amongst all of those who attended the workshop. And this is, I would say there was a commitment made to those in attendance that, that's not good enough. Like, we need to be better as a society. So, but the question, I think, is brilliant, because what those of us who attended the training, we can take that knowledge onto the work site, but we also need to lean into other ways to create awareness for the work site as a whole, whether that's through training, cross training of people, whether that's through the incorporation of policies on worksite, whether it's through levering what we now know as Be More Than a Bystander facilitators to make that type of awareness available to everybody, so that it's not just a select few who are being the mouthpieces of a movement. We need to use this information and then build upon it with the other programs and services that are going to make the entire work sites aware or woke to this type of culture change that's going to be required. Because we get it, we understand that now, but there's a whole industry out there that we're just scratching the surface of, and we need to make more meaningful impact by levering more exposure to more people within the industry.
That's so well said. It reminds me of something that the previous Minister for Advanced Education and Skills and Training has often says, Melanie Mark, that we need to be in the same canoe paddling together. And so I think in this discussion, that canoe might be a ship. And we need all of the pistons and everything going in the same direction in order to sync up that it's not just siloed subsectors within various trades across the province and across our country. We need to be able to be in the same canoe, paddling in the same direction together. Along that exact line, I'm going to throw a question to Rod. And this question is, here it is. Has there been a movement to bring the Be More Than a Bystander training to students in the Trades Foundation program? It seems to me that even though change must also come from the top, introducing these skills early could be very effective. What do you think, Rod?
Yeah, great question. Great question. And I totally agree. I think ITA, for example, I referred to the space that we occupy and the different types of organizations that we interact with. One of them happens to be the trades training institutions that train our apprentices. You know, one of the things that we're committed to over the next year is 8 cohorts that really focuses on reaching out to those institutions to be able to educate them on Be More Than a Bystander and really engage them. And we're getting some really good uptake. So I fully agree that this conversation should start as early as possible, but also tap into the different streams that eventually have someone go into the trades. You know, we can traditionally say that it's a person looking for a trades work and goes to an employer, becomes a trades worker. Well, there's people coming through foundation classes, people coming through apprenticeship classes, people going through the high school training programs. So from our perspective, that's the arena that we want to play in, to be able to really impact with not only a demonstration of our own experience as an organization around Be More Than a Bystander, but actually to take the lead in the next step and really commit not only resources, but time to be able to say, look, we've got these training sessions. We actually are appealing to you to come out and take them, and then really working with them to make them understand the benefit on so many levels, to the individual, to the organization, to the instructors, I mean, there's a lot of upside to that approach from our perspective. And I think that's where organizations like the ITA and Chris mentioned as well, you know, we can have a tremendous impact.
Yeah, I would say that not only is there a lot of upside, I don't think there's any downside.
No, there's no downside. You're right.
You know, and what I started getting excited about hearing you talk, Rod, is imagine the difference that could be made if institutions, training institutions and other institutions saw that part of their give back to society, aside from the benefit that might bring your own workers, knowing that especially these early training programs where those people might not end up as an electrician working on a job site, they may decide it's not for them. But while they've been going through the foundation skills, they happen to learn some life skills that are going to make them and their families and other people in their lives safer. And what an opportunity that would be if, again, so many agencies and institutions were to see that was a little bit of their give back. Here's a question that I want to throw over to Laird. I'm smiling because I know Laird is surrounded by really strong women. And I love this question, as I do all of the others. And here's the question: how can women build camaraderie with men, especially in the form of jokes, without putting themselves into either a questionable position when they end up feeling disrespected, or alternately labeled as prude? And, you know, I've been doing these trainings with male-dominated industries now for about 10 years, and I'm often quite surprised at the way men joke with each other. I mean, a lot of it and most of it is all in good fun. And I've often thought, you know, it kind of sometimes would be hard for a woman to get in there. And it's certainly hard for a woman to interrupt and say, hey, I'm calling you out, that's not acceptable. Easier for men on men to do this with men, I think. But what are your thoughts? And you probably had conversations with the women around you about what role can women play in speaking up and being more than a bystander and not be judged by the men around her?
Oh man, another big question and a great one. Thanks for that. Look, as we've talked about for most of the last hour, this program is about men taking responsibility for what is predominantly, vast majority, almost exclusively, bad actions that men take. So men need to step in, men that don't do that. and make a change and make a culture shift. Men need to be respectful of women and of all gendered persons in the workplace and in their home life. There has to be room for people to be able to be have some joking around and things, but it can't be demeaning. It can't be inappropriate. And I am surrounded, and I mean, Tracy, I am surrounded by strong women in the labor movement who are exceptionally eager to step in and assist and pull on this conveyor, if you will, and have been for decades. And there's lots of room for all of us to do it. There's no doubt about that. Not to parse it down, but if there's difficult moments where somebody's being inappropriate of any gender, I think more than a bystander has a role to play there. But I think in reality, the vast majority of the issue we're talking about, almost exclusively, is men taking accountability for men. So women are there as our allies. They've been doing this heavy lifting without us. Now it's time for us to step in and say, we have a role to play here to sort out our own gender and say, that's not good enough. You don't do that anymore. And that's the key to this whole program.
That's so powerful, and I know that you and have said more than a few times how many pages out of the books of women that you take and you carry with you in your life. And I would say to the woman that asked the question, if I may, that hopefully as time goes on and more people get involved in this program, when she speaks up, hopefully she's not going to be alone. And so if you happen to be the person that has the courage to speak up first and interrupt something that is unacceptable that's been said, or a behavior that's unacceptable that's been acted out, hopefully, and one of the bystander theories, like one of the ways of being more than a bystander is to call on other people around you. So if there's somebody there, I might be the first person to speak up, and I could say, hey, Rod, you agree with me, right? Can you help me here? Like, do you think what just happened is okay? And so you might be the first person to speak up, but hopefully you're not going to be the last, and that you can depend on the fact that there's going to be other people in the room that share the same views as you. Because at the end of the day, I don't think people want to come to work and put people down and create a poisonous environment or be involved in toxicity. I think people want to come to work and do a good job and get along with their colleagues and know that they're making a living, to support themselves and their family and go home. The vast majority of people are not into this behavior. And so I think it'd be fair to assume that there's going to be other people around you that would back you up. Okay, so we're winding it down. We've just got a couple of minutes left. I wanted to make sure that we ask this question, and that is, and I'm going to send it over to Chris, and if there's time, maybe Rod could weigh in on this as well, is what organizational benefits have you seen, like specifically, directly in your workplace for people that have taken this training?
Well, like Laird, I am surrounded by professional and competent leaders and strategists in my association world. And the work that we do to advance the recruitment and retention of women is in construction is one of the pillars of our strategic plan. It's something that we are continuing to drive from what we call that top-down approach from industry, from making sure that our members understand the importance of this going forward for our benefit, for our collective benefit as an industry. So we've just seen a fundamental shift in the past, I would say in the past 3 years, as to how before it seemed like there was quite a bit of resistance, whether it was with the members we would speak to or even board members, to be a 180-degree turn in support of it. And now we find we're pushing on open doors. We are getting traction for having people volunteer and want to be part of these programs. So this is an amazing program. We're glad that we are participating in it, and we're glad that we have other assets to lean in to help amplify the good work of the Be More Than a Bystander program.
So articulate and so thorough. Thank you, Chris. I don't think, Rod, we're going to have time to go to you. I wanted to give JR the last word. Something that JR often shares is a quote by Martin Luther King. And I think it's very appropriate to what this whole movement is about.
Thank you, Tracy. And all of us know people, I think, that have been affected by violence, bullying, harassment. And the quote is, in the end, we may not remember the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. And so I challenge you to do something. Be the change you want to see. If not you, then who? You know, it starts with the people on this call. Thank you so much for allowing us to be part of this.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, JR and Chris and Rod and Laird and the BC Centre for Women in the Trades and the ITA and Lisa for creating an opportunity to have an important conversation with an important sector that has an opportunity to make great change. So I'm honored to be having been with you on International Women's Day. I wish everyone well and good luck with the rest of your conference.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Tracy, for your amazing leadership, for this program, for your continuing to set such a fabulous example, and also to all of the panelists for the engaging discussion. Catherine this morning said that, Catherine Room, one of the panelists earlier this morning, said that leadership is about two things, courage and authenticity. And one of the things that struck me as all of you spoke was how very much all of you, all the panelists on this panel, as well as the moderator, how you walk that through, how very much courage and authenticity you show. I'd also like to thank JR and the BC Lions for the great work that you do, and JR in particular for always being willing to show up. Thank you to the ITA under Rod and Shelley's leadership, who have become champions for this amazing program. Thanks to Laird and the BC Federation of Labour, who supports BC CWIT. And thanks to Chris Atchison and the BC Construction Association for their work on cultural change. We really can't do this work without our male allies and the organizations who provide support. So thank you all for your help. I'd also like to comment that one of the differences that I noticed today in listening to the panels in comparison to panels about women in trades that I've attended and sometimes sat on for years, I love how every one of the panelists today point the finger back at themselves. The question isn't what can somebody else do. The question isn't what can government do or what can some other organization do. Each one of them spoke about how they turn it inwards to figure out what can they do as individuals and what can their organization do. And I think that's why these panelists are so amazing, because they always ask themselves first, what can I do to advance this issue? Thank you for that, and please keep asking that question. I've also mentioned the April conference events a few times, and so wanted to make sure that I pointed out that there will be 2 Be More Than a Bystander workshops offered. As Rod said, also the ITA is contracted with BC CWIT and EVA to do 8 more cohorts over the next year. And to some of the questions about trades training institutes, as Rod said, those cohorts will be targeted to those trades training institutes. So we're really excited about that upcoming work. It's now time for another break as we prepare for our next session, Normalizing the Trades as a Career Option. So again, pop into the sponsor or exhibitor centers, put some comments in the chat, spend some time networking, or just close your eyes and tune out the virtual world. We will meet back here at 1:15 for our next session. Thank you.